Hey, good evening, Indiana. Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from an unapologetically leftist perspective. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I am broadcasting from Bloomington. Joining us shortly this evening will be tonight's guest, Sharon Wight, candidate for Indiana State House in District 81. From her website, quote, Sharon comes from a family of varied experiences. Her father was an early pioneer in computer and radio engineering. Her mother initially planned to be a music educator, but also spent many years raising Sharon and her sister. When Sharon was in high school, she encountered an unexpected career experience as a church secretary, where she remains today. Sharon's parents are representative of the variety found in her family. Education, music, engineering, faith, as well as farming were all values instilled for Sharon at a young age. She was proud to spend K-12 in Fort Wayne Community Schools, which allowed her to meet individuals with diverse backgrounds. Educational experiences in early life have been critical to how she views the world today. She holds 2 master's degrees and uses those daily in her work in educational technology as well as higher education, including as an adjunct instructor at area universities, an academic advisor at Purdue Fort Wayne, and briefly as a dual credit instructor at Homestead High School. Currently, she works full-time as a project manager for an educational technology company that produces websites, apps, and mass communication systems for schools across the United States and Canada. Tonight, we're going to get to know Sharon a little bit, talk about the composition of her district, and ask what made her to decide to run for office at this critical juncture. But before we get there, a quick ask. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have advertisers. We don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network that we refuse to hide valuable information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding articles to your people. You get us next time. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. You can follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us. It's on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. It's at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, where you don't get that many characters, it's PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Now, let's welcome to the show, Sharon Wight. Sharon, welcome.
Good evening. How are you doing, Scott?
Doing fine, thank you. How about yourself on this fine Friday night? Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Galentine's Day to you. It is a good weekend. I am fortunate enough to work for a company where we will be having President's Day off as well on Monday, so that is really exciting. And I did. There was something in the rundown that I did not tell you. I kept it as a little surprise. I actually paid for a subscription last night with Progressive
I saw
Indiana
that.
Network. You did see it, okay?
I deeply appreciate it. Yes, thank you so much. And hey, if anybody else are watching wants to also chip in, we would deeply appreciate that as well.
I really believe in the work that you guys are doing. I'm really excited. And I know that this is very much a passion project for you and the others that are on the network. So glad to see this happening in our state.
It really is, and we are just plugging away. Derek Holder from the Hold 'Em Accountable podcast put out a couple this week. He's doing great work. Brianna Newhart, the Recovered Republican, also just dropped a bonus episode today. We are working overtime going into the primary here on May 5th, and we're going to keep at it all year long. Big year, big election year, critical year for our state and for our country. So I guess let us start there, Sharon. I like to open up these shows with a segment I call Easy Dubs. the easy W questions of journalism, the who, what, when, where. Well, I think we talked about the when, which is now 2026, big election year, and the what is you are running for State House of Representatives up there in District 81. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So you actually did a really great job. I'm actually a lifelong resident of my district. I've lived in a few different homes as an adult, and my mom still lives in the home that I grew up in. Even if the district had a different number, because there have been changes to the maps over time. We talked a lot about maps early in December, but there have been a lot of changes to the maps over time. But I've been represented actually by our incumbent for the last 13 years of my life. I work full-time in education technology, like you said, as a project manager, and I'm a part-time college professor. One of the things I'm most proud of, though, is that I am a proud product of public schooling. I went to Fort Wayne Community Schools, where my middle and my high school actually were at the time the two most diverse schools in the corporation. My high school was represented by over 60 languages. And I say all the time that my school may not have had the best technology or the best classes at the time, but what we did have was we had a way to get to know people from literally all around the world. And I feel like that's worth its weight in gold. I also I'm a lover of diversity. I'm a lover of travel. Traveling is my number one favorite thing to do, even though it feels a little bit harder to do that these days. And I'm a former exchange student mom, hoping to potentially do that again in the future. And another thing that's really important to me is I recognize what a privilege it is to be able to do what I'm doing, because this takes a lot of time. This takes a lot of money. Not everybody can do this. And not everybody has jobs that have the flexibility that mine have. And so I recognize what a privilege it is to be able to even think about running for office, let alone do it.
Yeah. I had Drew Cox on last night, and he's running for Congress down here in the 4th congressional district. That's huge district, but kind of Lafayette's sort of the center of it. But that's something we talked about was, the importance of folks who can step up, who have privilege to be able to get out there, and like, now is the time. You have to do something. You have to spend that political capital, whether you earned it or not, right?
Exactly. And another huge thing that's important to me, and I know that we said that we're probably going to talk about this a little bit, is my tagline, which is leading with empathy. So I definitely want to get into that. Where that came from, I actually was watching, I don't remember what I was watching, but I saw Elon Musk say that empathy was the West's biggest weakness, or was going to be the death of the West. And that it was actually almost in that moment that I decided that I needed to do something, because empathy is such an important thing to me.
Boy, I'll tell you what, like, Musk is a perfect example of this, but like, whenever folks start talking about Western civilization, you got to be wary of them, because sometimes folks are just really into history, and other times Western civilization is just a very fancy way of saying white.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your district a little bit. Before we hopped on here, I was looking at the map a little bit, and I said, let's find out a little about the fighting 81st up there in Allen County. And I look, and this is symbolic. We had this fight over redistricting in the state house at the congressional level in December, and thankfully there were enough sane Republicans in the state Senate that did not want to go along with Trump's gerrymandering gambit to carve up the state.
Thank goodness.
Cut Indianapolis into like 4 congressional districts, right? But that, at the state level, we're still carved up pretty badly. And the 81st is up there in Fort Wayne, like we said, in Allen County. And I see the city of Fort Wayne is basically divided into 6.
Yeah.
Cut off communities of interest. This is what they do. So tell me a little bit about the 81st, maybe relative to some of the other districts in your area. What sets it apart? How is it similar to the others? You know the area best. Tell us about it.
So, like I said, I have lived here my whole life. My mom still lives on the street that I grew up on. And what's kind of crazy is the street that my mother lives on is 3/4 District 84 and 1/4, I mean, doing rough numbers. I'm a communication person. Numbers aren't my thing. But rough numbers, a quarter of her street is my district. My mother is in my district. If she lived one house over, she would not be in my district. And I think that's just so emblematic of what this particular district is. It's also, but one of the beautiful things about it is a beautiful mix of urban, suburban, and rural. We have all three in my district, which to some might seem like a challenge because you are dealing with different voters. But because I love diversity so much, because I come from a family that does farming, or did farming. We still own a farm in Missouri, that no one on the family actually works on, but it belonged to my grandparents. But it's still in the family. It's still something that we talk about a lot, and those values are instilled in me. So having a rural foothold as well as urban, which I'm very familiar with since that's where I grew up, and then suburban, and it's also one of the fastest growing parts of the county, if not the fastest growing part of the county, and it's also one of the richest parts of the county, depending on what part of the district you're in. So you have all socioeconomic classes. We have a strong immigrant population that is kind of throughout that area. And then we also have farmers. So we have this huge gambit of different individuals.
We were talking about the way gerrymandering carves up communities of interest, and I can't think of a more glaring example of literally like carving up the same street, like your neighbors across the street who cannot have more shared interest politically than literally your neighbors on the same street. And also, so 81, you talk about it, so sort of stretching out from within the city out into the rural areas of Allen County. Does that also cross school districts?
Yes, it does. We have 2 different school districts that are represented, as well as, I believe, one of our biggest Catholic schools. I can't remember if it's what's so crazy. I can't remember for sure if that school is in the district or not. But yes, Fort Wayne Community Schools, which is I like to say this all the time, it is the largest district in the state of Indiana. So, I would love to be able to help them out some. And then we also have Northwest Allen County, which is a district that was hit actually pretty significantly by the drop in property taxes last year. So much so that they actually did a referendum. They were one of the 6 districts across the state that attempted to do a referendum, and ours did not pass, unfortunately.
That's what I thought. That's why I asked, because I saw that you were sort of in northwestern part of the county. I'm like, that's Northwest Allen. That's the one that didn't pass the referendum, and that's also one that's got a big life-wise problem, and that's it's Christian Nationalist Academy. Big red bus. They come take your kids out of school during the school day to give them in some indoctrination, and then they send them back with ice cream. So the other kids are like, hey, I want to go do that. Really shady stuff. I've talked about that with Dr. Michael Schaefer some here on the program. I can maybe point some folks back in that direction in the show notes if they want to learn more about that. So yeah, again, school districts, communities of interest, these things should theoretically be represented by one person in the state house, and then they carve it up for political expediency.
And the needs of Northwest Allen and Fort Wayne Community. First of all, it's only a quarter of Fort Wayne Community because it only technically represents 1 or 2 of the high schools, but it's also Northwest Allen County has very different needs than Fort Wayne Community Schools does in general, but even more specifically, the schools that are covered by 81 they just have very, very different needs. And so as a representative, having to address those needs is complex. And that's definitely one of the roles that our representatives, at least at the state, or I believe at the state level, generally are making decisions on. So how can you make decisions when you have the richest of the rich, while you also have those who are dealing with situations where, they don't have what they need in the classroom?
And, listen, without getting into too much detail or going on the attack, I can bet we know which constituency your Republican opponent is going to bat for.
I think we probably can. He has done some with education, but a lot of what he has done has been actually bills against not-for-profit hospitals. And so there are some things that I could see myself agreeing with him on. It's just, like I've said, I've lived in the district my entire life. He's been my representative for 13 years, and I haven't seen any net positives in my life as a result of that. And most of the people in my area haven't as well.
Yeah, that's par for the course here in Indiana, as we're well into 2+ decades now of supermajority rule, and everybody seems upset, rightfully so, about the state of our government, and yet we keep sending the same people, or at least the same party, back into power again and again and again and again, and expect different results. That I don't know if that's just the campaign money and good messaging, or riling people up and getting them angry and pointing the finger at somebody else, or what. But man, it is got to be time for a change. So, Sharon, we sort of covered the easy dubs, right? The who, what, when, where. The more interesting W, I find, is the why, and you talked about it a little bit with Elon Musk and the attack on empathy. But let's get into why you decided to run for office at this time. Listen, it's a dangerous, scary time in the world right now. We see MAGAs coming after their own in the state house with the redistricting fight. They're threatening them if they don't go along with the most extreme version of every bill that the Republicans are putting forward. If that's how they treat their own, you can only imagine how they treat the Democrats. So, what made you decide to put yourself on the line in this really dangerous time?
So as I was thinking about, I did a little bit of research, and so I knew that the dubs were coming, and I did think about it. I'm like, why now? But also, why District 81? So I split it into two different things. So why now? I've thought about doing this pretty much my entire adult life. My original plan was to be a social studies teacher back in the early 2000s, where it was going to be very difficult to get a job, and so I switched gears. I went into communication, which I absolutely love. But I held off for both personal and logistical reasons. So logistically, for a very long time, especially after 2012 or so, because 2008 was kind of the rah-rah moment for Democrats. Well, I wasn't old enough to run for anything then. When I got to the point where I was old enough, we were in the middle of that supermajority, and I believed the myth that as someone who leans heavily left, I had less of a chance to make it if I decided to go for something. And I watched the state shift. And it wasn't until 2018 when Kyle Miller, who is our representative for District 82, he knocked on my door. And I opened that door, and I assumed that he was not someone I wanted to necessarily talk to. I didn't think that we would necessarily have the same ideology. And I kind of shooed him off my doorstep pretty quickly. And to be fair, I also had a black cat at the time who was an eloper. And so that was part of it. But it was, millennials, we don't necessarily like to answer our doors. He knocked on the door, and
doors, phones.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, basically. He handed me his material, and I looked at his material and realized what a big mistake I had made. I messaged him that evening. He and I have been friends ever since. So it was Kyle taking that step in my district, showing that he could close the gap. And so he did a lot of really hard work to close the gap in both the 2018 and the 2020 election. Well, the 2022 election, he got pushed into a different district. And so he has a different district now. Personally, I was building my career. I was dealing with some medical things, both of which kept me from joining sooner. And I also initially had a career in public higher education, where I was a part-time professor and a college advisor. And that would have caused me to lose my job. And something we will be talking about in a little bit is the fact that running as a representative in the state of Indiana is a part-time thing. So you have to have another job. 2020, even though I became very ill in 2020, it reinvigorated my interest back into politics. But I had to get healthy. So I'm healthy. I'm in a job that is very flexible and supportive now. And so also it's that the 2026 election seems like it could be one of, if not the most consequential election of our era, of our lifetimes. And I believe in going big or going home. But finally, I'm doing this because I feel like, and I worry a lot, that this could be the last opportunity as a woman to do something that I have genuinely dreamt of doing my entire life. And as fate would have it, yesterday on my Facebook memories, I saw this quote that I posted this time last year from Jon Stewart, which is, "Action is the antidote for anxiety."
It's true. Listen, I know all about that because I'm an anxious mess, and that's why I stay busy all the time.
I'm the same way, and I have a number of people in my life that tell me I need to slow down a little bit. I'm like, no, you slow down. You give into the chaos, and it's just a problem.
I am a machine, and this machine kills fascists, and when it breaks down, it breaks down.
Exactly. And then as far as why District 81, I believe very heavily in collaborative leadership. So when I, made the decision that, hey, I think I want to run for something, I got introduced to my party chair, and I had very frank discussions with my party chair about where am I needed? Where do you need me to run? I want to do something. I want to help it. I want to take action. Where is that? And I was really willing to run anywhere up or down the ballot. I have fully assumed the role of running for 81 since. I'm very excited about it now. And I'm actually running in 2 additional races. I'm running for state delegate and for precinct chairperson. So I very much believe in doing the work. One of the things that I say over and over with my team, as well as with my friends, is that I want to be a servant leader. And I knew that but one of the things that I did know is I wanted to run at state level or below, because one of my areas of passion is accessibility. And accessibility is something that really, even though there is some that happens at the federal level about it, most of it is the federal government saying, here's kind of the budget. And then it's local and state governments actually making the laws. And here we are. I had watched how Kyle was successful in 2018 and 2020, but also this district to me is home. I've lived here my entire life. I've lived in a few different places as an adult. Like I said, my mom still lives in the place where I grew up. But all 3 of my homes as an adult were in slightly different places in the district. And because of these, I've experienced different populations. And in the 13 years, I have never had the opportunity to meet my incumbent opponent, even though he has been in the role for 13 years.
Hasn't knocked on the door once, huh?
No, he is not.
That's disappointing, but also not surprising. So tell us about your campaign slogan there a little bit, about leading with empathy. Like, we talked about Elon Musk saying that empathy is going to be the death of the Western civilization, right? And I know there's like this Christian nationalist author, Allie Beth Stuckey, wrote a whole book about it called Toxic Empathy, that basically excoriates us for putting ourselves in other people's shoes, for understanding folks. They say that that is how good Christians are led astray, that they wind up like endorsing lives of sin by sharing empathy for folks. What do you say to them, and what do you say in general to folks who would say empathy is a bad thing?
It really frustrates me to hear that to hear the phrase empathy is a bad thing. I feel like empathy comes from really listening to people, really being able to put yourself in their shoes. And it's important to me as someone who is a representative to be able to put myself in other people's shoes. Because again, I come from a place of privilege. I come from a in the 90s and 2000s, it would have been considered an upper middle class family. I'm not sure what it would be considered now. But I came from, a family that very much believed in education and also supported education. I came from a family that, very much supported me doing, whatever my dreams were. And, because of that, I know that, but because of the schools that I went to, I saw that wasn't always the case with my friends. Some of my best friends had absolutely no support at home. And these are people that were still are vastly smarter than I am. And because they didn't have the support, they maybe took a little bit longer to get to their goals, or they took a little bit longer to kind of ultimately do the things that they're doing now. And I feel like if we just listen and we really start to absorb what it is that people are telling us. Another thing that because I work with the disabled community quite a bit, is people don't ask the disabled community what they need. When I was working with college students, this actually frustrated me a lot. People didn't ask what college students wanted or needed. We made assumptions. And I feel like listening or leading with empathy is being humble enough to realize, hey, I might not know what it is that you need. I need you to tell me what you need. And so it's being able to put someone in your shoes, actually listening, or in being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, actually listening to them, and then taking that and trying to turn it into something actionable.
I'm glad you bring that up. Like, that's what a representative is supposed to do, right? They're supposed to ask what their community needs and then help deliver that thing. I remember, my God, it's almost 15 years ago now when Richard Murdoch was running for the U.S. Senate. It was about 2012. This is the guy that primaried Richard Lugar and sent him into retirement. And he wound up losing the seat because he was a race in which the Republican would have been favored because he was such a heinous ghoul. But one of the things he said, in addition to some very, very offensive comments about rape, was that he wanted to have the office so he could inflict his worldview on the state, on the rest of the population. And it's like that, my guy, is exactly the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing as a representative.
Yeah, exactly. And I realized that there's actually probably a good number of my constituents that I may have a very different worldview than. And I'm going to still, if I were elected, I would still need to be listening to those individuals. I would need to be learning from them, and also finding out, one of the things that I always said as an advisor and as an instructor is that I want to listen between the lines, because it could be someone saying this, morality, XYZ thing, when really they don't know how to ask for help themselves, or they were raised in a situation where asking for help was seen as weakness.
Yeah.
And so it's about listening to them and then trying to help slow walk them to what it is they actually need, even if you're pretty sure they're not going to ask you for it.
And you said, it's disappointing that you said you were raised in the church, right? And, this is empathy. That's what Jesus was all about, at least if we're reading the same book. And somehow this empathy and that caring for the least of these, right, became a toxic concept on the Christian nationalist right. It does not make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was how my parents raised me. So even if the church looks a little bit different now, my parents raised me to accept everybody, love everybody, and help where you could. And so I I took those messages to heart, perhaps for better or for worse, and, took the church at its face value that, it was there to take care of people. But then as I got older, I noticed that a lot of the time, at least the ideology of the church itself, even if it wasn't necessarily the people, but it had become more about, here's our worldview. We want to take our worldview and we want to spread it, rather than, so the help kind of almost came with strings attached. And that's not necessarily always the case, but it was just what I saw in my own experience when I was growing up. And so that I got the you help part, I got the Jesus part here, but I kind of left the framework behind, as it were.
Yeah. So, well, okay. So about taking care of the least of these, you mentioned that, you're very much, you work with the disabled community and helping folks get what they need. And I wanted to sort of pivot there and talk about your big three things. And like your campaign website, very detailed. You've got, policy positions on just about everything. But, I only have so much wavelength, and as most voters do. So, when you're on the stump, you only got really about three things to talk about before people eyes glaze over. So let's talk about your three big things. And one of them is accessibility and inclusivity.
Yeah. So real quick, I want to say that policy area on my website, I did steal that from my friend Natasha Baker, who's running for Senate 22. Because we love Natasha. She's the best, but her social media game is on point. I stole that idea from her. So I just wanted to say that. But so I started several years ago. We're at right about 7 years ago now, really starting to explore some of my own issues that I was having, some of my own struggles that I was having, particularly mental health wise. But, kind of just running the gambit with physical and mental challenges that I was having. And one of the things that I came upon was sensory sensitivity, like having issues with various areas of your sensory experience. And I did a lot of research of that. Actually, pretty much every paper that I wrote in my second master's degree, I got that in 2021, 22, was written on how to make education more sensory sensitive. So I got very deep into study of that in those couple of years. And that made me really want to start finding a way to work with the disabled population to try to figure out what it is that they need. And so I had the opportunity last year. We have an organization up here in Fort Wayne called the League for the Blind and Disabled. They have something called the Inclusion Institute. And that is a year-long program where you learn how to become a disability advocate. And I had only ever really planned on taking it that far, except one of the sessions is doing a mock campaign. And that mock campaign, I was asked by my friend Luke Labus, who is I can't remember his exact title, but he was in charge of the Inclusion Institute. And he was the one who said, "Hey, I think you should be the candidate." And I said, "I think that sounds silly." And he said, "You're going to do it anyway." And so I was the candidate in that campaign, and that woke something up in me. So I look at accessibility and inclusivity from three perspectives. We have physical and digital accessibility to infrastructure. So by that, I mean, some of it's very obvious. So physical accessibility to, say, buildings like the State House, buildings like our government buildings, buildings like, the mall or schools. One of the things that I've started watching very closely. Actually, a couple of years ago, I was using a cane on a regular basis. And so you start to notice every bump in the sidewalk, every, divot in the sidewalk, every door that's difficult to get in and out of when you are in that situation. So physical accessibility infrastructure, but also digital accessibility to infrastructure, because a lot of our websites are they're very difficult to navigate even if you're fully together and you have 2 master's degrees and you've worked in education for 20 years, they can be still very difficult to find things. And so if there's processes on there that people have to follow and they're difficult to follow, that to me is still infrastructure. Another area that's important to me is accessibility of language. Again, I love our immigrant population. I love diversity. And one of the things I'm the exact opposite of the folks who say English should be our national language.
Speak English or you can get out.
Yeah. I've had 3 boys in my home that have been from different countries, and as an exchange mom, and having those kids and watching them communicate and communicating with them, plus my friends over the years, we need to make it, even if we ultimately would like people to learn English so that way they can communicate with us more efficiently, it's still beautiful to have that accessibility of language for people who are just coming to the United States. And then finally, accessibility to process. Again, going back to digital accessibility, there are processes that are just difficult to navigate. And they are difficult to navigate if, again, you are someone who, has everything together for you. And these processes are paying taxes, becoming employed, transportation, buying a home, etc. And when we make things in general more accessible, that doesn't just benefit the population that we say needs it. It benefits everybody. One of the things that I would kind of harp on as an academic advisor, and I had a very sensory sensitive office because I needed it. But then my students would come in and they would be like, I love how calming your office is. I love that, you don't have scent in your office. And so that was just an example of that. And so it was obviously for my own benefit, but then it benefited my students. And you never know when you are going to potentially need those things. That's a big thing for me with accessibility. You never know.
Yeah.
I was 35 years old or 36 years old when I had to use a cane for about a year and a half because of some issues that I was having. I didn't anticipate that happening at the age of 36, but you have injuries. The pandemic caused people to have injury at a rate that was significantly more than we expected. And so we just don't know. So what does it hurt to put that accessibility in place?
And well, I want to tie this back into the empathy thing, right? That how empathy has become a dirty word on the right. Well, we know how they feel about inclusion and inclusivity.
Yes.
That's part of the dreaded DEI, right?
Yes.
But like you said, making lifting the floor and making things better for folks who need the help, it benefits everybody. I bet you could tell us all about the curb cut effect, couldn't you?
Oh, yes, for sure. Well, and the thing is, if individuals who have a disability are able to get into the workforce, that means they're paying taxes into the workforce. That means they are going out and buying things. So it's an economic gain as well. So everything that we choose to do to make things more accessible actually has a pretty significant return on investment.
Yeah, it really does. And it makes things better for everybody, right? Like the curb cut effect. It just for folks who don't know, this is when, the municipalities, right? They cut out the curbs so folks with wheelchairs can use the sidewalk more easily. Well, okay, that's not just for folks in wheelchairs. That's for moms with strollers. That's for folks who have to use a cane, right? It benefits.
Well, and then for
even thought about.
For people that are low vision, and then also for me, I've had dogs for a long time. It's a lot easier with a curb cut to kind of direct your dog when you're walking them because they look at that and it becomes a visual for them. Like, oh, this is a thing that I can walk off of rather than
And some of us are just clumsy. Like,
well, there's that
we like that too. Yeah. So
Guilty.
I guess, along those lines of caring for folks who are not always cared for by society, your second of your big three things is LGBTQ rights. And, the queer community has been a punching bag for the right for a long time.
Yeah.
And they've certainly turned it up on the transgender community, especially in the last couple of years. But they haven't quit hating the entire rainbow, have they?
So I am actually a very proud member of the Allen County Stonewall Democrats. I'm an at-large member for that steering committee. We are just starting to kind of get off the ground, so I did want to plug that. But LGBTQ rights have been a cornerstone of my development into becoming a progressive. This issue, as well as universal health care, were the two issues that I voted on back in 2008. They were the things that as a 20-year-old, I was looking at and going, well, why can't my friends who are gay get married? Why can't my friends who are gay, lesbian, so on and so forth, be able to live their lives as consenting adults just like anybody else?
It's a freedom, right? It's a freedom issue.
It's a freedom issue, yes. To me, there's absolutely no reason that consenting adults should not be able to form family in the way that they want to form their family. Additionally, the attack on trans individuals who want to be able to live their lives is absolutely abhorrent to me. It is disgusting. And what I look at all of this is attacking people in the LGBTQ community is a incredibly easy way to other a vast group of people, because anybody can be LGBTQ, anybody who's rich, anybody who's poor, anybody who is Black, brown, immigrant, white, etc., male or female, or they, them. Any of those individuals can also then fall into the LGBTQ population. So it's a really easy population to look at and go, hey, we're going to hate them because then that's the thing that we hate about them. And
you've opened the door to othering, it's just like, okay, well, we're hating people now. We're blaming a certain subset of the population for our problems. It's it's a very small step to go from there to wherever you want to lead.
Exactly. And there are people who are driven by their morality. And so they make this an immoral thing, when really it comes down to they just want to look at them and go, well, I don't like them because, and there may be a million other reasons why they don't like them. And it could just come down to, you're not me. And at the same time that this is happening, there's been some things in the news recently about how people who claim that LGBTQ relationships and lifestyles are immoral, engaging in some pretty immoral activity themselves. And
that's a nice way of putting it. Certainly.
I figured if I softball it out there, we could get a little bit nastier if we really wanted to. But the people that I love, some of the people that I love the absolute most are LGBTQ plus individuals. These are the people that I absolutely want to fight the hardest for, because they're, again, it all comes down to othering and trying to make a group that is, very, what's the word? Convenient. That's the word I was looking for. Very convenient to decide to hate just because you've decided that XYZ thing is wrong.
Well, yeah, whenever there's a population that's it's not a whole lot of people, like you said, it's opening the door to othering. Well, that's only a few people. We can hate them, but we can hate a couple other people now while we're at it, right?
Well, and what's fascinating is they'll say it's just a few people, right? When they're saying, oh, we can hate those people. But then when they're taking that to legislation, it's, oh my goodness, look at this thing that's happening everywhere. Why? What are we going to do about trans individuals who are in athletics? the percentage of that of individuals who are
like one person. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so few people who are involved in that, but we're gonna fight this because they're going into these places that they're not supposed to be in, and they're going to hurt our kids, when really what they're essentially doing is, it seems like they're saying the quiet part out loud from their side. That was a little bit more feisty.
Yeah. So
but,
go ahead.
And so I believe that people should be able to love who they want to love, and they should be able to live in the body that they have determined is theirs to live in.
100%. And your top two issues are something that are deeply personal to me as well. I'm the father of a son who was disabled, and his godparents are a couple of gay men, and so yeah, and so like you're speaking about my people, and so it like warms my heart. Now, your third thing is maybe not as deeply emotional and personal.
Yeah.
It seems a little bit esoteric, but explain your third thing, which you've listed as a state house process reform.
So I love that you used the word esoteric. I feel like that's a word that is not used enough. But I've been watching my fellow candidates, and everyone, or a lot of us, are talking about healthcare. We're talking about education, and one of the things that I always like to tell people is I like to be a little bit different. You can probably see that from my colors that I've chosen to use. I like to, I wasn't born to fit in. I plan to stand out, that whole thing. But I've been watching the votes over the past couple of months and noticing that occasionally, so one of the things that really brought this to the forefront was that redistricting fight that we had back in December, because they had to change pretty significant rules to be able to change when session was.
Made it up on the fly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so this is something that's kind of been cooking for the past couple of months for me, but at the same time, has really been kind of brought to a head while I've been watching different votes take place, where we have people who are excused from voting for whatever reason. And so I did reach out to someone and say, what makes you excused from a vote? And came to learn that can happen if you have just stepped out. Apparently, it is something that can be done strategically. You can step out in the hallway in order to miss a vote, or you could be in the bathroom and potentially miss a vote, or actually have something that you need to go do. And so that, alongside what happened with redistricting, really made me think there are processes that are happening in the state house that are detrimental to not just the legislators, but to us as the people, because if our individuals happen to step out to do something else and they miss a vote because our votes are not held for an extended period of time. I don't know if you've watched a House vote or a Senate vote in the state of Indiana, but it seems like they happen like that. Whereas in Congress, they take a few hours sometimes. And so I feel like there needs to be a change there, where we actually start giving people time, while at the same time making sure that when we're making a schedule, that we're sticking to that schedule. But I think a lot of this comes back, and we've seen where when they want to change something, they can change something right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, the rest of us have rules that we have to live by, right? And
right.
We want our legislators, our representatives, should also have to follow rules. They shouldn't just be able to make things up all willy-nilly.
Well, and as someone who does deal with medical issues, and some of those medical issues revolve around going to the bathroom, not specifically going to the bathroom, but that's something that I have to do as a result of my medical issues. That was probably too much information, but whatever. But I think about the fact that, like, if I become a representative and I have to step out to use the restroom, missing a vote, like that to me is so insane. And it seems like there's choices with how the schedule is made are kind of done at will, they don't have a regimented way that they're making schedules with sometimes, little notice, maybe 24 hours notice to when a bill is going to be voted on. And that's, to me, that seems very strategic. If there's a bill that they know is unpopular on one side, doing the schedule in a particular way. And that might just be me reading too much into something. So
that's
putting
why
restrictions
folks don't like politics, right? Because it feels like the normal rules that apply to the rest of us don't apply to some people.
Yeah, exactly. And like, we have part-time legislators who only meet for 12 weeks out of the year. This is actually the thing that really bothers me. I understand, I think, to a point why in Indiana they're part-time. But what I don't like is that they meet just at the beginning of the year. So that means when there are critical things that are changing throughout the year, I look back at the pandemic, which actually I think happened after the session ended in 2020.
Yeah.
Certainly the George Floyd protests and what happened with George Floyd in 2020 happened after session. And depending on who's in charge, they're not going to call a special session to change the rules for that.
They can certainly call a special session in 2022 to take away women's rights, though, can't they?
Right. And call a special session to try to take away the maps that we currently have and do mid-district or midterm redistricting. And so it really frustrates me that, and I'm sure I'm going to get in some hot water with this one. I don't necessarily think we need more specific time. I think that time needs to be more spread out, that maybe we're having 2 sessions a year instead of just 1 session a year, so that way we make sure that things get addressed at both the front end of the year and the back end of the year. And also, because legislators are part-time, they have to maintain a full-time job, or they have to be lucky enough to have another source of income. And so that's where that privilege comes in. Yeah, that's where that privilege comes in as well. And perhaps if we had shorter sessions, it would become easier for people from different walks of life to actually represent, because it's a lot easier to convince your boss to give you a couple of weeks off a few different times a year. It's much more difficult to ask for 12 straight weeks off or a flexible schedule for 12 straight weeks. And I know where this comes from. This comes from this place of, they need to be at home serving the people. Totally agree with that. Wish that perhaps we saw that from maybe a few more of our DC folks. But at the same time, decisions do need to be made more often, especially in this world that we're living in, where things are constantly changing, constantly in flux. And this also means, because like we're seeing it with this session, where individuals or where we're having to make decisions a lot more quickly because we had 3 weeks of a special session, or whatever they want to call it, an early session, whatever. It was a special session.
Again, you're just making it up to go, right?
Right. But it meant that this session is now shorter, which means they have less time to make decisions on the things that they needed to be making decisions on. And so things are happening a lot more quickly. Maybe things are getting overlooked, and it takes away the opportunity in this first quarter for these representatives to have to do any self-care that they might need to do. And again, I'm leading with empathy. And so I have empathy for the representatives as well, who have things that they might need to do. And it becomes a disservice to the people of Indiana when someone cannot be in that room to vote because they had to go do something else. I did a little bit of research. There are 10 states in the country that have full-time legislators, and then there's between 15 and 20 that work what are called a hybrid schedule. They actually call our schedule a citizen-based legislature, which I actually really like the name. But because I think
it's all branding, right? It's not.
Exactly. I feel like it should.
What they're actually doing.
I feel like it should all be citizen-based legislature, but it's not a fun topic to talk about. My original plan was to come on and talk to you about roads for 20 minutes. So this seemed a lot more interesting. We have potholes like crazy up here in Fort Wayne. But I just feel like the way that things are currently done in the state house is potentially detrimental to the people of Indiana. And I would like to potentially see some changes happen.
And it touches on all those things, right? I mean, having a legislature that is hurried, that doesn't get a chance to fully debate things. They just come in, they've got their ideological position, they go, they vote. They don't have time to like take nearly as much comment from the actual citizens as they probably should, and that you get the results that we've had in Indiana for the last 20 years, where we rank in the bottom half, often the bottom 10 of all of the metrics that actually matter to people. Sharon, I wish we had a chance to like dig into more of this. But
and then you look at the 3 weeks of redistricting, and they were actually able to do all of those things that you just described. They were able to get public comment. Think about it. And we saw how that changed how they made decisions.
Right. Well, and I'll be talking to mad voters tomorrow at noon, and we'll be talking about what's going through the legislature right now. Stuff's starting to hit the governor's desk, and a lot of those decisions are made. Folks get 30 seconds to comment. We should really be taking more time to talk to our citizens. But Sharon, for the citizens up in your area, up in Fort Wayne, up in District 81, how can they get a hold of you? How can they reach out to your campaign? How can they get involved? How can they donate or volunteer?
So I do have a website, electsharonwight.com. On that website, very top of it, there is a button for donation, which will take you to my Act Blue page, as well as a place where if you are so inclined to request a yard signs will only probably happen if I make it past the primary. So I do have a primary opponent, and that individual does not have some of these things out right now. So I'm very much hoping to win the primary. Volunteers are worth their weight in gold to me, especially as we are going into this primary, and I'm going to need lots of help getting the word out that I exist to people. So volunteers, obviously, donation is more than welcome, as there are a lot of things that I would like to do in order to get out the vote. But unfortunately, those things do cost money. So my Act Blue is on there. That it also has a phone number where you can get a hold of me, as well as an email account and various forms throughout the website that I have created where you can either send me feedback or reach out to me in different ways. I also have a Facebook page.
And for the folks who are listening and not watching, elect Sharon Wight. That is WIGHT, so you don't accidentally go to the wrong place. Sharon, it has been a pleasure. I appreciate you being here with us on this lovely Friday night. And best of luck to you in the campaign, as we've only got a couple months left here before the primary. And those folks up in Fort Wayne, if you like what you hear, you know what to do next. Sharon, thank you so much for joining me here tonight on the Who's Left podcast. I appreciate it. All right. Once again, that was Sharon Wight, and that is, there we go, much better screen. That was Sharon Wight. She could use your help up in the 81st district there. Tomorrow at noon, like I said, I will be back with Mad Voters State House Week in Review as we discuss the legislation that is moving through the General Assembly. Like I said, bills are beginning to hit the governor's desk, so check that out and stay up to date. And of course, on Sunday morning at 10:30, I will be here for Who's Left This Week, Indiana's only Sunday morning political news show by and for progressives. My guests this week are Bartholomew County Democratic Party Chair Ross Thomas and Muncie area activist Chelsea McDonnell. I hope to see you there in the comments section Sunday. Thanks once again to Sharon for tonight's conversation, and thank you for joining us. One last reminder to please consider supporting Who's Left and the wider Progressive Indiana network with a paid subscription if you're able. This independent media project relies solely on the generosity of kind patrons like you to make this information available for free to everybody. Again, that's at progressiveindiana.net. We could also really use a follow on social media at Progressive Indiana Network on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the same handle. Over on Blue Sky and TikTok, the handle is PIN Indiana. You can find me on social media at Who's Left. direct message me anywhere at any of those sites with feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns, or you can email me directly at scott@whosleft.us. Finally, please forward the show to a friend and have them pass it on to Let's Keep Building This Project and a truly democratic state, one conversation at a time. Until the next one, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.